direction boils down to all those decisions you make.
The line itself forces debate.
So after that film, it's going to be very hard for another fashion brand to kind of come out and beat it.
And when the craft is serving something other than itself, that's when it taps into emotion and feeling.
Welcome, everyone. My name's Adam Woodward. I'm editor-at-large at Little White Lies magazine here in London in the UK. I'm also creative lead here at TCO. I'm very delighted to be hosting this session today, where we'll be discussing the direction category, this year's D&AD Awards, where the judges will come together and share insights into the winning works with the D&D creative community. I guess we should do some intros first. We've got everyone here. We've got our four lovely panelists. So who wants to go first?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Charu. I am partner and executive producer at Heckler, Singapore. Heckler is a production and post company based in Australia and Singapore.
I'm Jules Chalkley. I'm chief ECD based here in London, and I look after Ogilvy UK's UK output.
I'm Serena. I am Lebanese based in Dubai. I work as the creative director at Havas, Middle East.
I'm Karien. I'm a director based in Cape Town, South Africa.
Great, thanks everyone. I know there's a bit of discussion before we started recording about the selections this year, and it sounds like there was a bit of overlap and quite a few of you had kind of picked some similar work. So I think I'm going to come to you first, Charu, actually, to talk about your first pick, which was Burberry's Open Spaces campaign with Riff Raff.
I was actually quite delighted that I got to talk about this because this was the unanimous favorite for all of us from the jury. And it was definitely one of the entries that just stood out, both from, just the visual beauty of it and the craft, just the kind of casting and every single sort of aspect of direction that they'd looked at. And of course, our category was direction. And as with D&AD's, judging criteria, what we were looking for was, is the work kind of brilliantly crafted? Does the use of craft elevate the idea? Is the idea inspiring? And is it fit for purpose? And I think the jury was unanimous in thinking that this was definitely a piece of work that ticked all of these boxes. It's, of course, this campaign that takes viewers on a journey, through this like freedom of imagination. It kind of blurs the lines between sort of reality and fantasy, and you see these four sort of individuals that are floating kind of weightlessly through fields. And I think for us, it was just one of those things that just sparked joy, just the way that it looked, and the craft was just impeccable. It's something that we felt like the actual photogrammetry and the CGI was beautiful, but also it was just the idea and the landscapes that they'd chosen was just something that created such iconic, it was such a memorable piece of work. I think it was, for us, it was just one of those things that just was just beautiful. Yeah,
it's a really strong concept. And as you say, it's very well executed. Jules, I know this was sort of high up on your list as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to Charu's comments?
I think perfectly said. I think it just stood out for so many reasons. The craft, the simplicity of concept, and I just think the sort of work that seems to win big things like D&AD is work that sort of tends to feel iconic, that sort of changes the category a bit. And I think it's I think after that film, it's going to be very hard for another fashion brand to kind of come out and beat it. So I think that's what suggests the bar for us. I mean, I think it was unanimous. Unequivocal.
Did anyone have anything they wanted to add to that?
The only thing I would add is to just, it had such joy. It had such feeling. And outside of all the technical reasons why it was why it's a flawless piece of work, I think the top thing that stood out is it just transports you in its emotion. That's kind of the pinnacle of why we do what we do. Is when you manage to access feeling, then you've won. And it's so joyful that kind of did that in a beautiful way.
Is that what it's all about for you guys then, when you're kind of you've got your judging criteria, which is talking a lot about craft, but actually you're saying the emotional connection is the thing that really comes through. If it's something which elicits feelings of joy or is inspirational, that feels like actually with a lot of these selected works is kind of a recurring theme, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think I can't remember, but I think someone mentioned on the jury that if something is so beautiful that you almost like the craft is not even, you're not even noticing the craft, because it's really the fact that it moves you at a level that is, emotional. And so the fact that the craft is so good that it's not even a thing that you want to sort of notice or talk about, I definitely feel like that plays a big role in creating, memorable work.
I think that piece also really stood out quite early on, didn't it? It felt very, very obvious as a piece of work. I thought the standard was really good this year, but that one just felt from the beginning exceptional, I think.
Yeah, I think the kind of the feeling and the emotion is the holy grail. When you hit that, when you manage to, and I guess it's, often craft can get overshadowed by ego, and when the craft is serving something other than itself, that's when it taps into emotion and feeling, and that's when it is really doing all the things. I don't know if I remember all our criteria, but does it elevate the idea? Does it does it elevate the idea? Is it fit for purpose? Is it brilliantly crafted? All of those things, when they're in service of an idea and still tap into emotion, that's where you all want to be.
Let's move on to our second work. These are all obviously commercial advertising projects where a director's vision has brought a creative idea to life. And I can't think of too many kind of directors working today who have kind of stronger or more distinctive creative visions than Park Chan-wook. He's made this film for Apple, shot on iPhone, Life is But a Dream. And I know, Jules, this was that you kind of picked. Could you talk us through your reasons for that?
씨가 나중에 좋은 관으로다가 금으로다가 황금으로다가 새 관을 짜서 코에 묻어드리려고 했습니다요.
내 생전에 갖가지 도둑놈들을 잡아 죽여봤지만 관도둑놈 죽이기는 또 처음이구나.
아이고, 연이은.
This was more of a kind of an outsider, I think. I think it was sort of buried in the mix. It was just one of those brilliant things. It's like a brilliant find that I think, suddenly sort of started to sort of show itself for what it really was. And I think a bit like the Burberry film, it's a piece of work that sort of not only sort of lifts the product up, but it also raises a category. And I suppose from a directorial production point of view, it suddenly demonstrated the real power of shooting on an iPhone. And I think we sort of saw quite a lot of really, really nice films about product benefit of iPhone. There was some really good work actually. That was kind of, I think, got sort of left in the shortlist. But this one, I think, just embraced the phone for what it is, which is a camera, and made an incredible piece of film. I mean, yes, it's got Park Chan-wook directing it, but the way it sort of torture tested the product, so there's this amazing Korean story of the afterlife and life. And it was sort of it had sort of 60s hammered organ on it, and it was, this kind of part beautiful sort of music video, part sort of Korean tale. And it's just 22 minutes of raw entertainment. But you sort of go, when you think of it, you go, my God, they shot that on an iPhone. And you think the production industry from this point on must be thinking, well, why do you need, I think it's going to have sort of seismic repercussions, right? I mean, I'm not a director, but...
Well, no, I mean, I'm not a director, but as someone who kind of works within film, within Little White Lies, I know there's a lot of talk about iPhones and the kind of potential there. And obviously in this case, there's a lot of other stuff going on with lighting and costuming, and, the production values are very, very high. But I think as you say, it's really exciting that it opens this door. Charu or Karien, did you have any kind of thoughts on this one?
I mean, as a director, but I think what it demonstrates is the barriers are now so much lower. Kind of the same thing when digital cameras first came out, and you have less, if you have a great idea, you have less of a barrier to executing that. And as you say, it is obviously supported by a lot of production value around, shooting on a phone to make it look like this. You still need great lights and whatever. But the essence of, if you have a great idea that you want to make, I mean, it's, what Sean Baker's movie did for features with his first film shot on an iPhone. And it just kind of has brought that into the commercial space where it just challenges so many other ideas. And I think the other thing we loved about the film as well was just how it embraced an authentically Korean style of storytelling, which is so refreshing to see in the mainstream commercial, largely Western style of storytelling. It was so refreshing to be exposed to a totally different, we were talking about how it's a much more kind of spiritual style of storytelling. Structurally, it's different. Performance is totally different. And I think to kind of break out of the homogeny of what we see in advertising often was so lovely for us.
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to stay with you now, Karien, because we're going to move on to the next pick, which is Poison. Go on, you kick us off talking about this.
Which one's which?
I don't know. You tell me, Socrates.
Cheers, Kemi.
Cheers, Jason. God, that's lovely, that.
I remember seeing this ad when it first came out and just sending it to a bunch of people going, oh my God, imagine getting a script like this. And I think something that you mentioned about open spaces, Jules, was the simplicity of the idea really kind of struck through. I think it's, it's easy to dismiss that kind of spot because it's so simple, but we recognize the elegance in the directing. It was perfectly executed. It feels like the beginning of something much bigger, and in that sense, just tapped into kind of true entertainment. Obviously, it's a great concept, fit for the purpose. In the context of Britain seeing kind of one of their best actors pitted against a reality star, just demonstrated what the ad was about in such a good way. But bringing it back to the craft and the direction, I mean, it still makes me smile just when I think about it. It leaves me with a good feeling. It's the performance is so brilliant. Even going between the different performance styles of the two actors is so quintessentially representative of their different genres. It's just really a delightful piece of work. And again, it's lots of the conversations were around what's the kind of work we want to see more of? What's the kind of work that's going to push the industry forward? And that really solid concept, really solid writing, pulled off flawlessly and beautifully. And again, craft that serves the idea, not itself, was something that really shines through in this one. I could go on, but I won't.
I think this is a really interesting contrast with the previous work, which is obviously a bigger name director with a lot of their kind of signature traits in there and stylistic choices that you maybe recognize. And as you say, this one, it's more simple, but kind of deceptively so. And the directing is very unshowy, I guess. In terms of, when we're talking about all of these works and the judging criteria specifically looks at the kind of vision, and people use the words like visionary quite a lot. Actually, when you see something like this, it kind of adds a different meaning to that, I suppose.
Yeah, often, specifically in advertising as a director, your job is to serve the idea and to serve this concept and the script that you have. And I think oftentimes we see work that has huge craft ambitions, but not to the service of the idea. And I think the discipline of having executed this in such a brilliant level, like I say, was something that I think there's often work that goes unnoticed because the craft or the direction isn't shouting out about itself. But recognizing just what it took. Sometimes directing is deciding what not to do as much as it is deciding what to do. And really being disciplined with how this was executed. Not to say that it diminishes any of the direction. I think the performance direction is incredible. I think the shot design does exactly what it needs to do. The last little moment of like I don't know if that was in the script or if they came up with that, but it's really just a delightful piece of work. And sometimes also we try to not be too intellectual about. You can kind of go down a rabbit hole. If something works, it works. If something's great, it's great. And trying to recognize those things for what they are.
I think there's something that connects all of them, isn't there? And I think sort of Charu, you talked about it at the beginning with Burberry, which is like the sort of the delivery of all of those things is emphatic. There's no pulled punch. It's they've really gone for it and made it the very best. There's no sort of edges cut. There's no kind of quarter given in the storytelling. It's just, and I think they're all delightful for it. Actually, they're all so watchable.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think with Poison, it was that use of that restraint, that restraint that the director opted for, which I think was just so beautiful. Because you're right, it's about doing the simple things well, and I think direction boils down to all those decisions you make, right? About cast, about wardrobe, about set design, art direction, production design. So it's like, I think when you look at that piece, it's just doing all the simple things right, and just that is just pure joy. And so I think Poison was definitely one of our favorites as well between all the judges.
And doing those little things right, but for the right reasons. I think there's easily a trend to reward the things that jump out at us, but it's harder to spot. It's much harder to spot the little moments that are done quietly. And we kind of applauded the craft in this case for that.
Just thinking about your judging process more generally, obviously you've had kind of discussions prior to this panel discussion today about all these works. Were there any kind of emerging themes? I know, Jules, you just touched on something there, so maybe I'll come to you for this, but are there any other emerging themes or things that really resonated with you across these works that you selected?
I don't know, actually. Help me out, guys. I'm trying.
Tough question.
It is a tough question because I think
It's a tough question.
Yeah. To frame it another way, what are the kind of things you were looking for? I suppose maybe you didn't know until you'd found it or seen it, but what were the things that I guess most excited you, or that you were, that was I guess at the forefront of your mind when you were judging these films?
I think if I may, a theme I remember just kept coming back for me was hope. I think just a general hope on a human level, on a universal level, because a lot of these ads came post-pandemic or during the pandemic, and I felt like a lot of them celebrated human connection, optimism and hope, and a real desire to celebrate life. I saw that across all the different categories, actually, and it gave me this sort of joie de vivre, which incidentally is in the Burberry film, which we all love and which transported us all. But I kind of saw it across the board. That's for me. I think that was one theme that pops up right now.
Definitely. And I think there was a certain kind of authenticity, which for me was like, and I think I was also really, really happy to see the kind of diversity of entries from everywhere, and I remember there was a piece from India called Machine Gun Mouth, which I thought was so beautiful. And similarly, like from many other markets, and I felt like there was this move to kind of really more authentic storytelling, which I felt was slightly different to maybe what we've seen in the past few years. And also, I think there was I don't know if it's a trend, but we definitely saw quite a few entries that were a bit more whimsical and irreverent in their tone, which was really nice because it was a bit of a break from the post-pandemic, kind of slightly sentimental kind of work. So that was really refreshing and nice to see.
I think authenticity and realness, yeah, I agree with. And that's one of the main things I love about the spot that I picked, which maybe we'll get to later. But this celebration of real human condition and real human emotions and our imperfections and the beauty in our imperfections, that was also something very beautiful to see in a lot of the spots, the fashion ones, the lifestyle ones. There was a Swedish one that I really loved. I can't remember the name. A French one as well. So yeah, celebration of humans in all our vulnerabilities and in all our imperfections was also there. Yeah.
Well, let's stay on that theme then, Serena, because we haven't talked about your pick yet, which is the Paralympics Superhumans film.
Sorry,
by Four Creative. What was it that really struck a chord with you about this? I know this was a very kind of popular ad at the time in the build up to the games.
I'm going to talk about craft, but also about the spot itself, the creative, the concept. I can tell everybody in you, I've trained the best. When you work in the sweat and you bend. I'll start with the craft, maybe, since I was on the direction jury. I loved the pacing. I thought it was an editing masterpiece. The way that this was woven together. Pacing was spot on. The sound design was wonderful. Even the how sound was used in many instances, but not so many, in like the right places to be the transition between one moment and another was very interesting and very cleverly done. The line at the end is brilliant. To be a Paralympian, there must be something wrong with you. It's the line itself forces debate because, there's you understand what I mean. So I thought it was very clever. It was brilliant. I love the lightheartedness of the film. But that's not new because we have obviously the Paralympics spot from 2016 and 2012 that kind of have that same lightheartedness, but still it is worth celebrating. It is worth applauding. What I loved about this one specifically was that after two successful spots, I think the novelty here is, obviously the 2012 and 2016 was all about celebrating them as superhumans. And this one actually goes, all right, well, how can we do something beautiful and fresh and impactful, but not be repetitive? And this is where they celebrated their humanness rather than their superhumanness, if that makes sense. So it's the fact that they show all their struggles and the everyday challenges that they face and they humanize them again. I thought that novelty was actually, it was bold, knowing that they had a successful recipe from 2012 and 2016. So really loved that. That stood out for me. But yeah, generally I think it's just a brilliant piece of work. Just really very, very nicely done. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. The line at the end as well, as I said, it just provokes debate, and that's what you need to do with this topic, which I think isn't fully resolved yet, So just brilliant piece of work. I don't know if anybody else wants to also give me their opinion on the piece.
Yeah, does anyone have any further thoughts on this one?
To sort of do it once is amazing, but to do it three times, just shows you the sort of caliber of the sort of thinking that goes into making those films. It's really impressive. I mean, to be surprising a third time as well, and hit the heart like it does. I think it's just testament to the team.
Yeah, just another totally flawless. I mean, I can't fault any part of it.
It's really annoying, isn't it?
Yes, but even it has this beautiful kind of humanity to it. The imagery, the little hamster around the wheel, the kind of surreal and fantastical moments were designed so well. They communicate instantly what they couldn't do with the realism parts of the films, and again, just so unexpected and surprising and delightful, and the cinematography was beautiful, the performances were incredible, and again, just the irreverence of it, the brevity of the filmmaking and the tone is so relatable. It was just such a wonderful piece of work. We all loved it. Yeah, the music was amazing. The music was just, the re-recording of that track was done. The tone of that music just really set up the slog in such a humorous way. It's great.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something, I guess, to your point, Jules, about this being almost like a series, and you think, 2012, the ad was so big at the time, and that's crikey 10 years ago now, and I think it brings back a lot of those feelings. And I guess it's a time where, hope was a big theme then, and we were all kind of looking forward and quite optimistic about what was going on. And I'm sure I'm not just speaking alone here when I say that I think we all got a bit sick of the types of ads that were coming out during the pandemic with the sentimentality that you mentioned before. So yeah, it's interesting that this has kind of come up now as something which isn't necessarily, well, it's kind of new and not new at the same time, I suppose. And that theme of hope and joyfulness, they seem to have really come through in all these works.
Yeah, I think everything we've spoken about is really, there's a degree of escapism and joy and uplift to it all. It's just, they're really entertaining. I mean, all of them are really engaging and entertaining in their own way, and they just take you out of somewhere for a bit, which I think is really beautiful. All of them, actually.
But what I love about them as well is they acknowledge reality. And within that help you to find a moment of joy or entertainment or laughter. It's not outside of acknowledging kind of what life is, which is, I think, the difference between something that's sentimental and something that kind of helps you get on with it, which is lovely.
Great. So I think in terms of final thoughts, did anyone have anything that they wanted to say? I guess, are there any key takeaways from your judging experience this year that you wanted to share?
There are two things that I think, and I think that, and they're both about D&AD, I suppose, as a sort of a galvanizing idea. Was firstly, the work was beautifully global. There's just some amazing work happening everywhere. Just really incredible work that I think is and to just see it all pulled together in one space. I mean, there was a lot of it, but it was just a real joy to watch all of that. I mean, just great work from Korea, Japan, it's just amazing. And then the other thing is, I think that I love is that if you're a sort of a young director, you can be on the same playing field as Park Chan-wook, which is amazing, right? You can go up against him and people like Tom Hooper, and just like that breadth of talent in one space is just, it's not, I think you have to be a certain something to be in the BAFTAs and, the Academy, but this just feels like such a brilliant sort of space for brilliant talent to emerge and grow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, unless anyone has anything to add, I think that's a very pertinent note to end on. So thank you all for joining me today. It's been lovely chatting to you, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on all this work. Thank you, Charu, Karien, Jules, Serena. It's been really nice meeting you and speaking to you.
It's lovely to see everyone again.
Yeah.
I feel like we went through something.
Yeah, totally. No, thanks for having us. It was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks a lot. It's been great.
Thanks.